Right now, I want to bring in a very special guest. It is a person I consider my friend, a person that I've worked with for a long time, a little bit over a decade now, a political analyst, a journalist, an activist, an organizer, a presenter. I mean, literally anything under the sun, and a co-host of the Truth Wire. Welcome to the show, Fiorella Isabel.
Hi, Niko. Amazing to see you here. You're doing an awesome job, by the way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Fee, and well, rather fam, because I feel like it would be inappropriate for me to call you Fee and not fam during our first interview on Most Together. But I appreciate you coming on. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. All things are getting a little bit hectic here in Moscow for the 80th celebration of the Victory Day. The sacrifices, as you mentioned in your opening statement, 27 million people from the Soviet Union. This is so much deeper for a lot of the people here than I think most in the West can truly understand.
Now, you actually posted the other day that you were at a concert. I'm assuming this is like one of the celebrations leading up to the Victory Day celebration. Can you describe that concert and what it was like for you to be there, be in Moscow during this?
Yeah, so this concert will actually, people will be able to see it in Russia, I believe on Channel 1 on Friday, May 9th. And that is basically a celebration of, and also in a way, a very nostalgic understanding and participation of all Russians, as many as could go, to really see the significance of World War II, the significance of what is called here the Patriotic War, because for Russia, it was specifically the moment they entered and the moment these battles were lost under, of course, the Soviet Union, which included, of course, so many countries like Ukraine at the time as well. And there was the participation of so many young people who were the organizers who were helping lead this event, which to me just signals the historical education of the population of Russia, the way people are passing down these stories and the way it still means something, even if people aren't political, because you have to understand Russia has a very diverse population and not everybody is up to date as to what's happening. But so many people, it was completely full, went there. And it was hard to describe being there with Russians who have lost relatives. They carried their faces on poster boards, kind of like the Immortal Regiment parades you've all been seeing all over Europe, all over the world, even in Australia. People walking around with the portraits of the relatives who were killed or died recently or at some point, veterans of this patriotic war. And they made a performance with many songs that all Russians knew. And, and I was trying to understand as much as possible because obviously it's not an easy language, but it was the feeling, the emotional pull of all of that was very significant. What reminded me of when I was in Lebanon at Hassan Nasrallah's funeral, that sort of sentiment of something bigger than yourself and understanding that historical connection. It was just something that was incredible to witness and really touched me, especially, of course, in comparison to what Donald Trump recently said. I don't really pay attention to rhetoric too much when it comes to anybody, especially Trump, because he says whatever's on his mind. But in this case, just seeing the vast difference of what we are told, Niko, in the United States growing up, that we are the heroes, that without us, World War II wouldn't have been won, and that we did the most, and we're Captain America, we saved the day. That brainwashing that is instilled in us, it's just so incredibly jarring to see the truth, even though we've heard it, we know it, to witness it is on another level.
I was going to add, first of all, I'm glad you mentioned Ukraine, because we're going to talk about that in a second, how the fact that they were literally part of Russia, and instead of celebrating, they're impeding the celebrations at this point. But I was going to ask, how does it feel being there, witnessing all that as an American? I know that you're Latina, but like, you're an American, you were subject to the same programming and propaganda that I was subject to growing up. And so how did it feel like knowing like, wow, we were just lied to, and it's kind of scary how many Americans have no idea the truth of what took place at the end of World War II and what led to the end of that war?
I think in a way, you feel a little bit of guilt or a significant amount of guilt for, I don't know, not doing enough to get the truth out there. And I think, we in the United States, we promote propaganda so much, whereas Russia, they don't really have, they don't do it in the same way. And so it's just really enraging in many ways to sit there and be humbled in a way where I feel like we should know better. We should somehow get this information out. There's so many people, when I posted that comment, Niko, that were so just butthurt about the whole situation. They were saying, no, that's not true. The communists, they were terrible, blah, blah, blah. And it's the same repetitive slogans. And as an American, the one thing that impacted me the most was really understanding that we could never imagine what these people endured. The same way I've been to West Asia and seen the destruction is the same way I've been to Donbass and seen the destruction. We can't imagine what it would be like to lose 27 million Americans. We can't even, it's incomprehensible on our own in our brain.
Yeah.
On your own
100%,
soil.
100% agree. That's the thing that gets me. Yeah, it's like if somebody shows up at your doorstep and you got to be ready to shoot. Like, that's crazy.
To see your city destroyed because they gave a lot of facts while they were doing this, how Moscow was under attack. And I can't imagine how that would even happen now, like today. And that is something that is unacceptable to Russians. It is unacceptable that they would allow this to happen. This is why what's happening now is so relevant. You talk about the Battle of Kursk. Well, the Battle of Kursk was won twice now by Russia in 1943 and in 2025. And so to me, that just tells you the parallels of history, the rhyming of history, right? We're in different situations and different theaters with different faces, but a lot of the themes are just the same.
Yeah, history echoes, and I like how you said that it's incomprehensible. Like, that explains why Putin made the decision, or at least could help people understand why Putin made the decision to go into Ukraine. Because like you said, the idea of experiencing 27 million people because you reacted too late is incomprehensible, and they refuse to allow it to happen again. So if you want the smoke, then that's what we're going to have to do. It's not that he choked, because he tried every avenue, even treaty talk. And they didn't want to, NATO and Ukraine didn't want to adhere to those stipulations about not advancing. And that's what happened. So speaking of Ukraine, I'm sure that you heard that there were reports that Putin actually initiated a 3-day ceasefire probably in remembrance of V-Day, especially because, once again, Ukraine was actually a part of V-Day, and they actually celebrated at one point until this war started Victory Day alongside Russia. However, instead of Zelenskyy giving his soldiers a break, it seems that he's taking the opposite route. He actually criticized Putin for introducing this temporary ceasefire. And it looks like that he even did try to attack Russia. What do you make of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's just touch on that first. It's moments before this momentary ceasefire takes place. And Ukraine has been attacking civilian infrastructure, attacked Crimea, which is a done deal. Crimea will never go back to Ukraine. It was decided 10 years ago. This is completely irrelevant at this point. And so now they decided to put out the largest drone attack in the history essentially of this entire war, with 524 Ukrainian drones. And then they had missiles. They had also the HIMARS rockets, all of that within 24 hours. Of course, all of it was intercepted by Russia, but this was in Moscow. This was like in this vicinity of this area. It wasn't just, far away or in the Donbass. So it's kind of shows a few things. It, to me, it's a signal of desperation, right? Ukraine knows this is a done deal. I for one, believe that the United States and Russia do want to find a solution because for various reasons. But one of those reasons being that there is a desire for the US to move to a different theater, right? But for Russia, they just want to be done with it. They want to open up economic trades with everybody. They want to stop the war. Because no matter what, even if you are the victor, war is still a loss. You know, you're still losing people, you're still losing
Yes.
money, your attention is somewhere else. And so at the end of the day, there is a desire for Russia to do this. But Zelenskyy seems to be playing the role of just the petulant child that will not give up. But I think if we know very well what Ukraine is and what the US is, the puppeteer, right? The master behind all of this, the architect of this war, we know very well that if the United States ends support fully, this is all going to go down the drain. And right now, the latest conversations, the back channels that we're seeing is that there is an attempt to really, really stop this. And at every turn, Ukraine just makes it so much more difficult, as does Europe. And
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing here
Do
is
you
just
feel
a call for desperation.
Do you feel like that Zelenskyy made this attack on Russia behind Trump's back, even potentially behind Europe's back? Now within context, once again, there was Ukrainian soldiers marching alongside British soldiers during their VE celebration. So I'm not sure, what to make of that. But like you said, Trump doesn't like losing. And Biden came out and admitted in an interview, Ukraine had no chance of winning this war, which is basically just reaffirms the reasons that Trump wants to pull out. So do you feel like potentially that this attack was done behind Trump's back and there might be repercussions because of it?
I think there's a lot of things at play here because we know that the United States is really the architect of this war. However, now, as you said, Trump wants to win. He doesn't like to lose. And Trump ran on this, right? Remember, he said he was going to end the war in 24 hours. And then he gave a Time interview where he said, no, that we were just joking. And that wasn't the case. But yes, we want to end the war. He needs a win. He needs to get out of this. This needs to be looked on not as a failure, which is what it is for the United States, for NATO, et cetera. But it needs to be kind of manipulated into a PR win. Oh, we're going to give Ukraine money we're going to make a mineral deal for Ukraine. We're helping Ukraine when really we're just basically taking all of Ukraine. Oh, we're going to make peace with Russia when really you lost and you need to, cut your losses. And so I think Donald Trump really needs to get this to end. But in terms of Zelenskyy, there's only so much that he can do to show that he's fighting for Ukraine, right? So I think there is some theatrics going on here, kind of like their spat before, because Zelenskyy has to show that he's not giving up on Ukraine. He's already disliked severely. In my opinion, they will get rid of Zelenskyy. Yeah. He's not going to be the leader much longer of whatever's left of Ukraine. So yeah, I definitely think there's some push and pull there and some theatrics behind the scenes, but Ukraine's destiny is no longer up to Ukraine, unfortunately. And they could have gotten out of this sooner, much better. And now there's no going back.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Their destiny's been out of their hands for a while. Really, you can make an argument that their destiny's been out of their hands since Joe Biden took office, which is a whole different conversation. But I find it interesting that he decides to conduct this attack on VE Day, the day before VE Day. He tries to attack Moscow specifically. That level of provocation is absolutely insane because Putin has already made it clear that he doesn't even consider Zelenskyy to be a legitimate leader. So if he even entertains a peace deal where Zelenskyy is the other party, that would be judicious of him. That would be magnanimous of him. But now it's like you attacked Russia on one of the most important days or at least one of the most important weeks of the year. What exactly did you think? What do you think is going to be the outcome? What? I don't see a world now where Zelenskyy can remain in power in any capacity whatsoever and this war ends.
Yeah, I think part of the deal will be to eventually replace Zelenskyy, and Russia needs to ensure its security guarantees as much as possible. But what Russia should know, and I think what some in Russia do know, is that the United States can't be trusted. They're building up opposition still in Romania, opposition in Moldova, and the Balkan area, in Germany, Poland. For the next administration, as you know, Niko, the administrations take turns, right? So that is true that there should be a watchful eye, even if we do get an end, quote unquote, end to this war. It's not something that I think the U.S. is going to give up on especially with this minerals deal, because they'll be right next to Russia with access to a lot of resources, which we know our empire is about resource extraction. Now, on the other hand, when Russia is being attacked directly in Moscow, Russia has been attacked numerous times, has been targeted via terrorist attacks. They are not an emotional, Putin is not an emotional president. He doesn't react like many in the US. He is a very logical president. It is a very pragmatic country. So I don't think they're just going to retaliate in the way that many people would want them to. Like, oh, just go ahead and get rid of Ukraine. Look what they've done, blah, blah, blah. This is not how Russia functions. So they're going to be as diplomatic as possible with the patience that many don't have. It's just so bad.
Good stuff. We got about a minute left. Let everybody know where they can find you, Fee.
Yeah, so y'all can find me on X at Fiorella Isabel M on X, and you can find me on Substack, where I just wrote the latest piece precisely covering the Ukraine, Russia, US potential ceasefire deal, potentially covering also the May 9th celebrations and a lot of the geopolitics around that. And you can also find me, of course, on just Truthwire on YouTube, where I go live every week.